And health, well, you could take a different course of action. You could put plain packaging on some things that we eat and drink. And let's talk to Dr. Azim Malhotra, cardiologist from the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges. And I know you would like there to be less branding around sugary drinks for a start.
Well, absolutely, Jeremy. And I think, first of all, just very briefly, I completely agree with your previous speaker about smoking. I mean, one of the biggest impacts on cardiovascular death reduction has been reduction in smoking prevalence. And coming back to sugary drinks, I mean, plain packaging on sugary drinks, maybe a skull and crossbones would be better. Typically, a can of cola has 9 teaspoons of added sugar. Now, what the public need to understand, and this is not what the industry tells us, is firstly, there is no nutritional value in added sugar whatsoever. And secondly, you don't need any carbohydrate for energy from added sugar. Now, what the industry does is they market these products saying they're happy calories. There's nothing happy about these calories at all. We know from scientific studies that even drinking one sugary drink a day is associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes by 22%, independent of body weight and independent of physical activity. We know that sugar consumption has trebled worldwide. One very important study published out of Stanford University several months ago actually revealed that if you look at sugar calorie consumption, for every 150 calories of sugar one consumes additional to their normal quota compared to calories from another source, this was associated with an 11-fold increase in the prevalence of type 2 diabetes, again, independent of your weight, independent of physical activity.
Okay, have a listen to this ad we've made up.
They're a silent killer. You won't see them coming until it's too late. You probably think they're your friend. Harmless, fun. Fizzy drinks can contain so much sugar that just one a day could double your risk of diabetes. Over time, they raise the risk of heart disease and death. Think before you drink.
But that sounds crazy to give those kinds of warnings about things that we all consume.
Sure. And Jeremy, you know what? There's nothing wrong with having the occasional treat. You know, we all we clearly, human beings have got a liking for sugar naturally.
Of cake? How often would you have a piece of cake?
Well, to be honest, let's look at the scientific evidence. If you really want to have informed choice, and you should be able to eat these products on a level which isn't going to harm your health. And I wouldn't want to give absolutes here, but to be honest, I would say 2 to 3 times a week maybe a sugary treat, and that's actually still quite a lot. Personally, I've cut out sugar completely from my diet as somebody who had a sweet tooth.
If I gave you a Mars bar now, you wouldn't eat it?
No, not at all.
Really? Even if I said, look, it really tastes nice.
Well, actually, I've conditioned myself to try and avoid these products. I mean, actually, I'm glad you mentioned Mars bar. So one Mars bar actually has the same amount of added sugar as a can of Coke. It's marketed in, the food industry targets children with these. Mars is the official sponsor of the England football team. Now,
that's
actually,
9 teaspoons of sugar.
9 teaspoons. And the US dietary guidelines several years ago actually said a limit of sugar for the average 4 to 8-year-old child was 3 teaspoons of sugar. One Mars bar has 9.
So what does it do when it gets into our body? Be as biological as you like. Let's try and understand this.
Okay, so intrinsic sugars, no problem. We all need glucose necessary for life, for energy. Okay, and intrinsic sugars, which are present
What's an intrinsic sugar?
Intrinsic sugar, basically what's present in whole foods, like vegetables, whole fruit, starch has glucose in bread and that kind of stuff.
But bananas, fine.
Absolutely. The problem is, juice is also not healthy, but I'll talk about that in a second. Added sugar, essentially, the problem with added sugar is it's usually either it's mainly in the form of sucrose, which is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. Now, fructose is the problem. So very small amounts of fructose present in fruit is not an issue. But what happens is the food industry have added it into most processed foods. We know 80% of the foods that are marketed, for example, or sold in America have added sugar. And what people also don't realize that's really important is actually about 50% of our added sugar consumption comes from foods we don't even realize have sugar in them, like salad dressings, ketchup, bread, for example.
Yeah, I noticed, I'm going to mention the breakfast cereal, All Bran, I ate this morning, and I looked on the side. And there's sugar. There's quite a bit of sugar in that.
Absolutely. And what the industry does is they markets them as low fat, and they're full of sugar.
But not much time. Tell us what happens. The sugar gets into the bloodstream, and then what?
Yeah. So biochemical evidence reveals that fructose, in particular, which is an added sugar, is metabolized purely by the liver. What the liver does, it's very similar to alcohol. It basically converts the fructose to fat, which is consumed in excess. It increases risk of high blood pressure, and increases insulin resistance. Type 2 diabetes is one of the biggest threats we have to our health. It's something, believe me, you do not want to have. Entirely preventable. Increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, depression, many cancers, Alzheimer's disease. This is a disease that is entirely preventable. We need to try and combat this very effectively, and targeting sugar would be a good step
Thank
forward.
you very much, Dr. Azim Malhotra, making the case for plain packaging on sugary drinks and snacks and chocolates and all that. Let us talk to somebody with a different interest. Eric Appleby is Chief Executive of Alcohol Concern. Eric, would you put some plain packaging on some of the drinks we see on the supermarket shelves?
Well, I think drinking certainly is in there in the pot with all the others in terms of something we need to have a look at. I'm not sure it would be plain packaging. Maybe it would be a list of the 60 different parts of the body that alcohol has an effect on, because we've got to the point now where all the various forms of promotion taken us to the point where it's just accepted as normal to have a drink available everywhere and like that any and every occasion. So we've got to that point now where we certainly have to look at the way alcohol is promoted.
So you would want something that said, think before you drink this, or have it on Saturday, have it on Sunday, but don't have it any other day of the week.
Well, that's the sort of message we need to give to people, because as I say, alcohol seems to be pretty much accepted as normalised as part of our life, and unfortunately, what also seems to be normal is the amounts we drink. At the same time, liver disease has gone up by 60%, 65% in the last 20 years, when every other major disease is going down. And
are you seeing now, I gather, young women in their early 20s with cirrhosis of the liver that you wouldn't normally have seen until people were in their 60s?
Absolutely, that's right. And particularly amongst young males, for example, under 30 males, there's been an over 100% increase in young males with liver disease in the last 10 years, which is horrendous.
But it's associated with fun, and once you take away the branding, you've almost got nothing left, have you? It's just liquid with alcohol in it.
Well, that's a good point, because the problem is that we're being sold this on the promise that it's essential to having a good time. That you can't have a proper social occasion, you can't celebrate something. We're now even being told by the government that you can't have your hair cut without having a drink as well. And so we've got into this position where you really are conditioned to thinking that you can't have a good time unless you have a drink, and it is possible.
Thank you very much, Eric Appleby, making the case for plain packaging on alcohol. Dr. Azim Malhotra talking about sugar before that, and Ian Wilmore on smoking, which is today's news. Before him,